Hi, I'm Sarah Fraser. I'm a self-employed permaculture gardener and my absolute passion is fruit trees. And that's what we're going to be doing today, a little bit of pruning. Big loppers, a small pocket silky saw and some secateurs. And the first and foremost thing is to have them clean. Bit of white spirit, very old rag, and you just basically, between trees, you want to make sure that you fully wipe down the entirety of each blade as best you can so that you don't spread disease. So I have multiple tools for pruning because you'll only be able to slice a branch of a particular depth with that, and obviously the ratchet will let you go the same distance that the branch is but much neater. And then once you're in this size, I've just bought these new and they're great and they're sharp and they're efficient, but this hook does make it challenging when you're deep in trees or you're cutting above your head. I have another pair which are long-handled loppers, but they have a ratchet system on that.
So would you personally look for ones that don't have an arc on?
I have them all. Like, in all honesty, I think it depends on your trees. If you've got a new young tree and you're going to keep on top of it, you're probably not going to need something massive. If you inherit an older tree and you're taking a lot off, it's probably worth investing in something bigger, you know. But it really does just, yeah, I will literally work with all of them sometimes. My little ratchet, which is maybe only that size, I've not had out because I've had that and because it's so new and it's been so sharp that I've not really had to worry, because that depth is quite big. That space is as big as you'll get, you know, and that obviously has a mechanism to help it do that, which is slightly different to that. So it really is all about what mechanism they've got. So I use two different types of hand secateurs, and one, as you saw, just a simple cut, which is absolutely fine when you're just chopping things that are little, like that. If you want to go a little bit further up without using the big loppers, I use a ratchet, and it simply means that the ratchet is doing all the work. Do it again. So, a bit of damage to this branch, so we're just going to cut it back, and using the ratchet, the top part just stays. You release the second bit, and that's where all the effort is. And you always remove those first three parts before you do anything else to the tree. So, we've got damage. That branch there is going to carry disease because of how tight it is there, so that would come out. And at the moment, there's probably more damage than there is disease on these trees. So fruit trees are grafted onto a rootstock, and this is a really good example of where the tree has produced shoots from the graft, both of which aren't doing any favours to the tree. And you can kind of see that line of where the graft would have been. Again, it's one of those things that over time becomes more obvious. But ideally, yeah, you would get rid of the stake and you would get rid of all of that part of the tree. So another part that needs to come out, this is obviously being damaged by the stake, which on trees that are about 8 years old definitely isn't needed anymore. We'll release it there, and then that way that branch eventually might be able to grow out from the tree. You can see the little bud, so we'll just neaten it up to the bud. So this is also really common on trees that are grafted. This has come from where the graft is, and this one is coming from the rootstock down below. So we want to take them off, again, as close as we possibly can. Which can be a bit fiddly. And that's why we have a saw. this will come right off. So we're moving it because it's damaged, but also because it's coming below the rootstock, nice and neatly in at the edge of the tree. So this part is very clearly dead, so we'd remove that right down. These bits are damaged, so again they come off right down as close as you possibly can, bringing it always back an outward pointing bud, so that can come back to there. Coral spot is one of the most common diseases that you'll find around fruit trees and also around roses because it's from the same plant family, and you just want to chop it out the tree, or in the case of this tree, the whole tree is damaged by it, in which case you just remove it. Very obvious, tiny little blotches that are coral coloured. So this is last year's growth, this part here, that looks slightly different. You won't get fruit on that, you'll only get fruit on the previous year's growth. So when we're pruning the end off, we take it to an outward facing bud. We make sure angled cut, nice and neatly up beside it. This is a good example of it just being overcrowded. These are just pointing upwards and inwards. So if we take all of these shoots off, again, right down to the branch, that will just open up air and light into the tree, especially once it's covered in leaves. This one's coming up, so it'll also come out on there. Immediately opening up that space in the tree. Potentially that's going to rub, so you would pick one of those and take that off. Same with these two, are potentially rubbing here. Take this one off. Sometimes it's not obvious which one to take off, but practice is what tells you which one to take off. And similarly, these two, leaving that one, and the little one beside it, you can already see the damage that that's done to that branch. What could be here on? So these branches are all going upwards and inwards. So again, we take them right off, right to the trunk of the tree. As neatly as you can. And then once again, shortening the ends. You can see the growth from last year, and we're going to trim it back to those outward facing buds, like so.
So, question off the top of my head, how often would you do this?
On these trees, because they've not been touched for a while, obviously they need quite an amount taken off them, but one thing you've got to be really careful of is not to take more than a third in one pruning year. All that'll do is send up an awful lot of water shoots, which just makes it harder to maintain. But hopefully with the right amount of pruning, you should only really be, as I showed you, taking off the previous year's growth, because fruit will only grow on the older wood. And beyond that, it's really the size of the tree, the shape of the tree, whether you can reach the crop on the tree, that determines how much you would take off.
And that branch that you've taken some off this time, you would leave that next year so it can grow again, because it'll grow off where the bud's going?
Yeah, so you can just keep taking it back to that year's growth, and the fruit will always grow on the previous year's growth. So that, if left that will be where the fruit will grow the following year, and you would take off that tip. Unless you're wanting a branch to grow, in which case you would obviously leave it or take less. The other thing you can do with something like that, when it's still quite young, you can put a really light weight on it, and within a year it will have forced that branch to sit at that angle, as opposed to it being up here for you cropping it.
So you're looking for kind of like a umbrella or flat shape, like a Serengeti tree.
You want an open shape that you're able to crop. So because these are all going up, putting a weight on it to bring the branches like that will just spread the tree out, allow airflow, and allow you to be able to get a much better crop. It's actually not too bad a tree of all of the trees, to be honest. So we have been pruning apples and pears today because they're hard fruit, they can be pruned in the harsh season. You wouldn't touch a cherry or a plum, which is soft fruit, which is done in the summer, until we're definitely past the risk of frost. So that will change slightly depending on where you live. We're in March, we've got an exceptionally beautiful day today, but we're still not past the risk of frost. So you would wait to prune something like this, plum or cherry, until we're definitely in official spring.
And that's because the apple trees are hardier.
Yes, much hardier. So cherries and plums are more susceptible to silver leaf, which enters the pruning cuts. The cuts we've made today will heal themselves, but cherries and plums are just a little bit more susceptible to that. So that's why you leave them until they're well past that.